Thanks for listening to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast, keeping you up to date with the latest in American soccer. And don't forget to subscribe.
Welcome to the 50th edition of Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast. I'm Steven Jodderin here in Wisconsin. Joining on the line is Armand Kafai in Texas and Jake Watroba in Minnesota. Fellas, how we doing?
Round of applause.
Great. I'm feeling great. We just get a round of applause for episode 50.
We did it.
We did it. We did it. We started from Steven's room in Frisco, and now we're worldwide, I guess, right?
Yeah, we are nationwide at least, right? Hey, we did go international. We did have guests from Mexico call in.
We did interview. Well, you guys interviewed Keaton Parks from Portugal, so
that's true.
That counts.
Yeah, that counts.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you, Armand and Jake, favorite moment so far of Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast.
For me, I would say my favorite moment had to be when we interviewed John Strong. It was kind of a fangirl moment, really fun interview, and it's also been a pleasure to meet all the cool guests that we've interacted with and stayed in contact with them. So, I mean,
can my favorite moment be a previous episode?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like one I listened to. Favorite moment of the show had to have been the reaction to the U.S. losing to Trinidad and Tobago, and you guys recording a podcast, maybe an hour or so after the result.
Man, Jake, it's hilarious because we were like texting throughout it, and like as soon as it happened, we like just call each other like we have to make a pod, and we hopped on it like pure emotion, like pain, like sadness.
And I wasn't a part of the show then, and that like you could hear the emotion and just how pissed you two both were because of the result, just like anybody was. And that I think that one will always go down as one of my favorite episodes.
Oh yeah, I mean I really enjoyed the interview series that Armand and I did over the winter. I thought that was a lot of fun. We definitely gained a ton of insight and just made a ton of connections in U.S. soccer that I just didn't think would be possible sitting at a Starbucks last summer when Armand and I were just drawing this stuff together. But in future episodes this summer, we got amazing bits coming. We got some awesome interviews, so stay tuned for that. On this episode, we're going to talk MLS rivals. Jake thinks it's all real man-made, these MLS rivals.
Yeah, Jake hates rivalries.
No, I don't hate rivalries, okay? I don't know. No.
Okay, we'll get to you, Jake. We'll get to you. Kevin Baxter, LA Times beat reporter covering the Galaxy and LAFC, will join us. But let's talk about MLS rivals and the rivalries within the league. As Jake Watroba really hates them and thinks... I think they're all... Part of me thinks they're very manufactured.
No, okay. Before we start putting words in my mouth, because that's what you two are doing.
No.
Let the record be known, I don't hate rivalries and I enjoy rivalries. However, the Hudson River Derby is the most overrated derby/rivalry in MLS. And here's why. How many have either of these sides, when they've played each other, has it been a close game? It seems like it's always 4-0, 3-0.
There was close games last season.
When? Okay. Well, what was one?
I'll fact check you, but keep going on your rant.
Fact check me, because I think NYCFC's only won once, haven't they?
I don't know. Keep going.
I'm gonna keep going. It's so overblown. It's like the most over. It's because it's two New York teams that MLS feels like it has to, showcase these two teams to the rest of the country, and I don't care to watch it. I don't know if you guys seem to care to watch it because you both reacted when I said I'm not watching it. It's the most overblown rivalry ever.
All right, so hate to interrupt you, Jake. Hate to interrupt you. So this includes a U.S. Open Cup match. So the last 5 matches before this last match, starting in 2016. So this is from the most recent one will be the last one. It was 4-1 to Red Bulls, 1-0 to Red Bulls, 2-0 to NYCFC, 3-2 to NYCFC, a 1-1 draw, and then the 4-0 defeat by the Red Bulls on NYCFC yesterday.
These are the most recent ones?
Yes.
Take that, Jake.
Jake's opinion is wrong.
Take that, data.
No, okay. Here's the thing, Jake. Here's the thing. The Hudson River Derby is good for MLS because it's inner city. But here's the issue. There's no history among these clubs. It's completely manufactured. I'll give you the best rivalry in MLS is not what you think. It's actually Montreal-Toronto. That is MLS's best rival because the cities genuinely hate each other. It is.
I agree with you.
The French versus the English. It's the Protestants versus the Catholics. It is literally everything that soccer is about is in that rivalry. Yeah, you can make an argument that Portland, Seattle is pretty damn good, but the was it El Tráfico? Please, that's manufactured. Nobody. How can you hate a club that hasn't existed yet? Going back a couple years now.
Let's wait and see because if El Tráfico is anything like the first El Tráfico, I would say it's a pretty good derby where it's back and forth and wait,
drama
involved and everything like that. I don't feel like that exists with NYCFC New York Red Bull. I don't feel that there's as much passion behind it either, considering that it seems like Red Bull can't even sell its own arena for when NYCFC comes to New Jersey. That's the other thing too. I hate the New Yorkers red, New Yorkers blue bit when Red Bull doesn't even play in New York; they play in New Jersey.
Oh,
how can that be a thing?
You guys are both crazy for not putting Seattle, Portland at the top of your list.
No, it's not. Rivalry. It can't.
That rivalries existed since what, like the 60s and the 70s, with like the whole in the old NASL and the other leagues. That's what you're talking about when you're talking about a rivalry that's ingrained in. I mean, it's still like relatively young, right? But so is I would say mainly soccer in the U.S. But I mean that rivalry is the pinnacle. Portland and Seattle do not like each other.
And the
teams don't like each other.
It's not the same as what? Montreal, Toronto have. That's
barely been a thing.
No, it's not because this is
the only time soccer wise that's been like.
I'm not talking. That's the thing.
Wow.
That's the thing. If you look at
Portland and Seattle don't like each other either, as in general, as cities.
That's true. But here's the thing. That is why it's up there. If not, it's 1A and 1B. Okay, but the point being is if you look at the best,
and 2, if anything, Portland and Seattle is one. No. Go look through that history. Go look through all that, and then catch up to it, and then tell me that's number 2.
Armand, the best rivalries in Europe are because of historic significance. El Clasico, the game that a lot of us watched, that's rooted in political. It's rooted in politics, right?
Rangers Celtic, also one that's rooted in politics and religion and everything.
I mean, you look at even the North London derby between Arsenal and Tottenham. That has to do with the politics of the relocation of a club in just moving and in land and all this stuff. That Montreal and Toronto encompass that. Portland and Seattle do too. But across the league, Houston versus Dallas, give me a break. It's separated by 6 hours worth of a straight road. What's the highway down there? I-35, right?
Yeah.
You drive for 6 hours before you get to another city. There is no hatred between Houston and Dallas. Among.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I know you mentioned the whole political stuff between Toronto and Montreal, but Portland and Seattle have it rooted since the 19th century. I'll just a quick look up real quick when they were having rivalries over trading routes. Tell me that's not ingrained in the culture.
And that's why it's 1A and 1B. These are the two best rivalries. I personally like the Montreal-Toronto bit because there's the language barrier. To me, it's a little more of the red versus the blue that you get in Europe. Okay, fine. Call me a little bit of a Euro snob. I prefer that one, but I'm not complaining about Seattle, Portland.
No, but I know what you're saying. The rivalries are more. They have more of the passion through stuff
The
that's
fans
not
care.
on the field.
The fans care. That's what separates those two compared to NYCFC and New York Red Bull. The fans care. They show up for those games. They hate the opposing crowd. Like you said, there's some history there. I just feel like Red Bull and City is just manufactured because based out of New York, and MLS just wants to capture that market when it's on TV. So they have to shove it down everyone's throats. Be like, hey, make sure you tune into NYCFC and Red Bull New York on Fox this Saturday. Like, I don't care. I don't want to watch it. It's terrible. Sorry. I'd rather shove a fork in my eye than watch it.
Jesus Christ.
No, okay, but Armand, I think it's all month long that MLS is promoting. Is it still Heineken Week? MLS Heineken.
I mean, not because there was the Hudson River Derby this week, and then Portland Seattle Cascadia Cup is on ESPN next Sunday, and then Orlando Atlanta is also next Sunday. I really wouldn't consider LAFC NYC even a thing, but it's there.
Yeah, but here's the thing. For example, Atlanta versus Orlando is an example of MLS manufacturing rivalry because Orlando didn't have one. It's based on location. All right, the closest MLS club is, now it's Atlanta, therefore they're our rival.
Hey, but you know what? Those crowds show up for those two matches. I mean, Atlanta packs in 70,000 people when Orlando comes to town.
Yeah, people care.
And this is the thing I was going back to with MLS. When they're putting like these rivalries, quote unquote, on TV, I've always said MLS needs to be marketing the atmosphere at stadiums versus the soccer. And I feel like with these rivalries we talked about, like Portland, Seattle, Toronto, Montreal, and to maybe a lesser extent Atlanta, Orlando, you have those atmospheres. It's raucous. It's there's tension in the crowd. With NYCFC and New York Red Bull, you don't have that. It doesn't feel, the game doesn't feel important to me when I watch it, especially when I see Red Bull Arena only has 15,000 people.
Yeah, what about other games? RSL Colorado, the Rocky Mountain rivalry, whatever they call that no significance to the fans, really. Houston versus Dallas, again, some fans care, but the atmosphere doesn't really carry that.
What about California Classico?
That did. I would say the California Classico did with the earthquakes in the galaxy because you've had history of that since MLS just started. I mean, I don't know if you've watched it. They packed Stanford Stadium.
Yeah.
So 50,000. I remember one of the things that really, one of the moments I think that really made me fall in love with MLS. I forgot which California Classico it was, but it was when Alan Gordon, I think San Jose were down to 10 men or something like that. Or I think they blew a 2-goal lead. And Alan Gordon comes up the 90th minute in stoppage time, nails a goal, and the commentator just loses his voice, and the crowd just goes crazy. It was one of the most electric atmospheres I've seen. It's entertaining. It sucks that the California Classico is kind of being phased out for El Tráfico. But, I mean, I think El Tráfico probably has more potential, no?
Yeah.
No, it definitely does.
I wonder if MLS has natural rivalries that has history. I think to a large
extent, they did. There's one rivalry that no one talks about that the people that are really close to Dallas and Chicago always talk about. It's the Bridgestone Cup. These two teams did not like each other, and it was created through how Boston, LA, that kind of thing. It was created like that through playoffs, through play. Is that what you're mentioning when you talk about natural rivalries?
Well, I was going to say
on the field play.
That and exactly that, and I think in some part the New York versus New England, that transcends all sports. You just hate the teams. If you're from Boston, you hate the teams from New York. And I think that carries not necessarily with NYCFC, but more with the Red Bulls because they're both original clubs and they've been in the league forever. You have some playoff back and forth. I think Henry's last year, they had the Eastern Conference Final, and I mean Gillette Stadium's lower bowl was packed. It was 33,000. So it's not like MLS has manufactured the rivalries or the derbies, yes, but there are some hatred among clubs that just has stemmed from on-field action like Chicago, Dallas. I think Red Bulls in New England, you could put it in that circle. What else do you think is there? DC United, LA going back, but the teams have kind of been irrelevant, or one has been good, the other kind of not. Just haven't met up all that much.
No, it's one of those things that, like, I don't know. It's just kind of hard to have like an on the field, like, natural rivalry. I think Toronto, Seattle might be getting there at some point, especially if they meet again, let's say for a third time. I mean, it's early in the season, and I don't want to say anything, but if they meet again for a third time, like, I would have to put that in a natural rivalry, like a Boston, LA in basketball.
Absolutely. Jake, Minnesota United, who's your rival?
Well, yeah, I think you guys are definitely bearing the lead here in terms of best rivalry in MLS, because obviously it's Minnesota United Sporting Kansas City. I-35 Derby, baby. And I don't even know if that's what it's even called, but I would assume that SKC is our rival. I don't know. Maybe Chicago Fire due to
who was Minnesota's rival in the NASL? Do you know, or?
No, because I'm not an NASL historian like you are, Armand.
I'm about recent NASL.
The recent NASL. I would assume it had to be Cosmos. That always seemed to be a big deal when they came to town, for the fans at least. So I'm not sure if it was because we hated the Cosmos, or if it was because of the actual, like,
the entire,
or if it's just because of the name. Maybe Indy 11. I'm not sure. Like, again, I don't feel like Minnesota has a natural rival in MLS or.
Well,
in
geographically,
NASL.
it's kind of hard.
Right. There's no team in Wisconsin for us to hate. So, like we do with every other sport.
Yeah.
So that's all I got. I don't know. Yeah. So we got no rivals up here. No one likes us.
Anyway, I don't know. We'll continue with this conversation on why Jake thinks MLS rivals suck.
Wait. But I want to interrupt. So I did some quick research. It says that there was a thing called the Flyover Cup between FC Edmonton and Minnesota. The name was chosen for Edmonton and Minnesota lying in flight paths for transcontinental flights, but often passed over by tourists.
We're flyover country, baby.
That's hilarious. But yeah, I mean, final thoughts on rivalry, Steven?
Final thoughts here with rivals. MLS, they have manufactured too many. There's only a handful, if not maybe two or three, that are genuine rivals where there's, lack of a better term, there's blood between the two. Other than that, most of the time it's, woo, yay, woo, oh no, that's our rival, oh no.
Why the high-pitched voice?
Because Mickey Mouse, is that you?
Yeah, to me, it's a little too childish. Like, it's not proper. Tottenham, Arsenal, Real Madrid, Barca, Inter, AC Milan, Dortmund, Bayern. Like, you go to some games, or even if in American sports, like the Celtics hate the Lakers, the Yankees hate the Red Sox, Pittsburgh Penguins hate the Bruins, Montreal Canadiens hate the Bruins.
The Bruins. Everyone hates the Bruins. I hate the Bruins.
You hate the Bruins.
Me too.
The Cowboys hate Pittsburgh. If you go to the NFL.
I hate the Eagles.
The Eagles versus the Giants, or the Eagles versus. You genuinely just don't like that person or the team or the city. That's how it is, and I think if MLS could capture some more of that hatred, the games would be a lot more appealing. Like, even if when we watch El Tráfico, the first game, I didn't get the sense that the two clubs hated each other. It wasn't necessarily a rivalry. They just so happened to be 11 miles apart from each other. Or was it 9? I don't remember.
Something like that.
Something like that. It's distance, and that when the rivalry is built on just geolocation, doesn't necessarily make it for a good rival.
Yeah, but I mean, if you get any more entertaining games like El Tráfico.
We'll see. It takes time. It takes time. You got to give it 10 years for it to really develop.
Fair enough.
Anyway,
it's like a good wine.
Yeah, it's like a good wine. Up next is Kevin Baxter, LA Times. We'll talk some LAFC and LA Galaxy. Joining us right now from LA is Kevin Baxter. He covers the Galaxy and LAFC for the LA Times. You can follow him on Twitter at KBaxter11. Kevin, how's it going?
All right, how are you guys?
We're doing good.
We're doing good.
Crazy stuff going on in LA with 2 soccer clubs. You must be a busy man.
Yeah, it got a little bit of a break at the beginning of the season in that LAFC was on the road for the first 6 games. But they're in the midst of playing 5 games now in 23 days. So it's gotten busy with them. And then Zlatan coming into the Galaxy, that's created quite a bit of news. So, yeah, it is a busy time. And then there's this tournament coming up this summer. You might have heard about the World Cup. That's going to be a big deal, too.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a big deal. But let's talk about the LAFC's last match against FC Dallas. I was watching the game. I'm sure Steven did as well. And after watching that game, I just felt like LAFC were kind of a victim of just not capitalizing on their chances. I thought they could have had a couple more before Dallas scored. Did you get the same feeling, Kevin?
Yeah, and so did the player. Steven Betasor said after the game that he thought it should have been 3 or 4-0 at least before Dallas got its first chance. The Galaxy or LAFC dominated just in about every statistical category. They had twice as many shots, almost twice as many shots on target. They had the ball far longer than Dallas did. I mean, they dominated just about every statistical category. But on scoreboard, of course, the game was 1-1. It felt like, LAFC is now unbeaten in their last 4, but they had a 3-game winning streak coming in. So in a lot of ways, I think to a lot of people, the draw felt like a loss because LAFC had dominated the game. They were hot coming in. They scored a goal against a team that at that point had only given up 6 goals in 7 games. So even the goal was a victory. But getting that many shots, that many good looks, they were snake-bit a little bit too, LAFC was. There was one great opportunity that Carlos Vela had, and he got his feet tangled with the defender and never got a shot off. There were a couple other wide-open nets that they just missed. Omar Gabber had one late in the second half that couldn't have missed by more than a couple of inches. So after the game, I think that the feeling was, yes, the score was 1-1, but it felt like LAFC had actually lost the game.
LAFC have let in quite a bit of goals. They're 6th in the Western Conference defensively. Do you think it's going to tighten up as the season goes along, as chemistry just gets better and they just get to play with each other more? I know Zimmerman was out for quite a bit of time.
I actually think that that's a little bit of a misleading statistic. You're right. They have given up 14 goals this season, but Tyler Miller came into that game yesterday tied for the league lead with 3 shutouts. And he actually should have had 4 shutouts, but he gave up a goal in the second game against Real Salt Lake. He actually stopped the penalty kick, and as he was prone on the ground after stopping the penalty kick, the rebound came out, and RSL scored on the rebound. So if he had any help from his defenders on that, or if he'd just been able to hold on to the stopped penalty kick, he would have 4 shutouts. The problem with the reason it looks like they've given up so many goals is there was a hat trick they gave up in the first half against Montreal. They came back and won that game 5-3. But the 2 big games were the Atlanta game. LAFC lost 5-0, and that was actually a 2-0 game in the 88th minute. And then João Mourinho, the rookie outside back, was called for a foul or a penalty that led to a penalty kick on which they scored. Then he committed another foul shortly after that, was red carded out of the game. There was another penalty kick, and then there was a final goal against a 10-man team in overtime. So they gave up 3 goals in the last 2 minutes of regulation and in stoppage time. So that was a 2-0 game. They wound up giving up 5 goals, and then, of course, everybody remembers the last 20 minutes against the Galaxy when they gave up 3 goals too from Zlatan. So take away the last 20 minutes against the Galaxy and the last 2 minutes plus stoppage time against Atlanta, and you take 6 goals away, and now all of a sudden they've given up 8 goals in 8 games. So that's much more manageable.
No, yeah, sometimes stats can be misleading, especially when you allow your goals in bunches. But Kevin, I also want to ask you about the attendance, which might be another stat, might be misleading. They announced a sellout, but I remember looking at your Twitter, it looked like it was not sold out. And I mean, I'm experienced working in Dallas. We know the misleading sellout. Yeah. That's a number one expertise of mine. So, what was up with that? I mean, I heard it was a beautiful day, but it looked like it wasn't full for their second game.
Well, I actually have a little bit of experience and background in this very subject. I did a story a couple of years ago, in which I was able to get records from. It started with Orlando City. I was able to actually get a turnstile count because at that time, Orlando City was they were still in the old football stadium, and that was a public facility, and because of Florida sunshine laws, they had to give me the government count, which was a turnstile count, and not the tickets distributed count. Now, all of MLS and other pro leagues do this. They use NHL does it. I believe the NFL and some stadiums do it. They use what's called tickets distributed. That does not mean that's the number of people in the building. That does not mean even that's the number of tickets sold. If I give you a ticket to the game for free, that's a ticket distributed. You didn't pay for it, and you didn't necessarily go to the game, but that counts. So if I give away 27,000 tickets to a Galaxy game, for example, there could be nobody in the building, and I'm still going to claim that it was sold out at 27,000. When I did this story, I found out that some teams like Orlando City, as much as a third of the attendance is not necessarily doesn't necessarily coincide with the number of people that either paid or showed up. So the point is MLS attendance figures are a little iffy at best. So now we come to LAFC. Their first game was clearly sold out. 22,000. Everybody was there. Yesterday was a little bit more difficult to figure. I tweeted out a picture before the game started that appeared to show about a third of the seats were empty. But in the same picture, if you look closely, you can see hundreds, if not thousands, of people trying to get through the security lines. So, the prediction was that the stadium would fill up probably by the end of the first half. What happened was it was a very hot day in Southern California. It was 96 degrees. They had 86 degrees. They had 2 water breaks. It was so hot. Fans told me on social media that they actually did not go to their seats, that they stayed on the concourse. They watched the game on the big screen. They stood in areas where they could see the field because one side of the field is totally exposed to the sun during the day. So a combination of people arriving late, not being able to get through security lines, and then some people not even wanting to go to their seats because of the sun, that made the stadium look like it was not fully sold out. The team claimed that they distributed 22,000 tickets, that there were no other tickets that could be bought on the day of the game. I did have some fans reach out to me and say they tried to sell their tickets on the secondary market, and they got no takers, which means that there wasn't a lot of demand for a Sunday afternoon day game, LAFC second game. So I guess I'm not as bullish one way or the other. I'm not going to say the attendance figure was false because there is a lot of interest. There is a lot of buzz around LAFC and the community. But I don't know, given what I know about LAS or MLS attendance figures, I'm not going to totally buy the fact that every ticket was distributed either. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think it was a very good crowd, but there were clearly some empty seats, and they weren't just because people were on the concourse.
A lot of the focus of our show here is talking about soccer culture here in America with 2 clubs in LA. How has that lined up? Obviously, there's a huge buzz with LAFC with a brand new stadium, all the different owners, Carlos Vela, but then you have Ibra on the other side. But how is the city reacting to having 2 clubs? And is this going to help promote the sport, or is it kind of, in some sense, LA has a bad reputation as a sports town because it's sunny and people want to go to the beach or go do other things? It's Hollywood. It's all there.
Well, having lived in Miami for 7 years and worked covering sports in Miami, I can tell you that Miami is a far more difficult sports market than LA. LA has now LA has 11 professional teams if you count the WNBA Sparks. They have 2 teams in every major sports league. There's 2 major college programs. So if you look at attendance across the board, I mean, the Dodgers always lead the major leagues in attendance. The Angels are always in the top 5. The Kings claim that they've sold out something like 300 consecutive games. The Ducks do very well. So there are a lot of people that go to games, and there is that old rumor that, and it's largely true, which is why it's still around, that fans arrive late and leave early because of the traffic. That's true, but LA fans are not nearly as fickle as fans in Miami, and I think the David Beckham group is going to find out when they get started that the buzz of that first season is going to be really good, and they're going to have strong attendance. But if they don't win, Miami gets behind a winner, but it doesn't get behind a middle of the pack team. In LA, it's a little bit different. There are loyalties. One thing we've seen already with the first LAFC Galaxy game is the derby here is going to be great, and it's already off to a good start, and it's going to be very emotional. That first game was, of course, one for the ages. So that's going to be very emotional. But people have tried to define the two teams, and it largely breaks down as LAFC, despite the fact they have 30 owners, of which most are millionaires, if not multimillionaires, and they have a $350 million downtown stadium, the richest stadium, most expensive stadium in MLS history. Despite all that money that is around the club, they are trying to claim that they are the gritty, urban, inner city team, and that's what they want to be, and that's sort of the persona that they claim. By definition, that makes the Galaxy sort of the white suburban team, and there's a way you can look at the Galaxy and kind of see that that's what they are. They are a suburban team. They draw fairly well from Orange County, which is an affluent suburb area of Los Angeles. So there is some truth to all those things, but there is a real soccer culture developing here, and sort of if you claim to be an LAFC supporter, you are claiming a certain description. You're claiming that you are diverse, that you're from the inner city, that you are multicultural, all those kind of things. And that you're new, and that you're an upstart, and you're aggressive, and you're millennial. All those things are words that are associated with LAFC, rightly or wrongly. That's sort of the persona that they've claimed. So if you're an LAFC fan, those are the things you are. By definition, they would say that if you're a Galaxy fan, that's what you are. You are suburban. You are a little bit more conservative. You are a little bit more established. It's the traditional team. They talk about their 5 MLS Cups, and LAFC says, what have you done for us lately? We're the team of now. And so there is sort of this soccer culture growing up between the two teams, and I do think it's good for the league because this is the second largest market in the league. It has two teams now. Chivas USA really at the end was not really a viable franchise in MLS. Now you have two strong teams with their own identities and their own building, and I think that's another thing that hurt LA before. Chivas tried to have an identity, but it was an identity borrowed from the Mexican League team. Mm-hmm. They tried to be their own club. They played in the same stadium and trained at the same facility as the Galaxy. Now we have two distinctly different teams with their own identities, their own homes, their own training facilities, their own ownership groups. It's much different, and I do think it's going to be great for the league, and I think the derby, in very short order, I think is going to be much more emotional and more important than the New York derby between the Red Bulls and New York City FC.
It's funny. We just actually talked about that. Kevin, I wanted to talk about the Galaxy, and ever since that amazing, I run out of words to talk about it. That amazing El Tráfico match, the 4-3 win over LAFC. They haven't been that hot. They've dropped 4 out of the last 5, including 4 straight at home. I watched the end of the Dynamo Galaxy game where they allowed the late goal to Memo Rodriguez. And is Ziggy Smith on the hot seat?
Well, that depends on who you ask. Some people say yes. There are some people within the locker room that kind of went into the season believing that Ziggy might not make it to the end. But they were saying it wasn't so much he was on the hot seat. It was just health issues. He just doesn't seem healthy this year. He doesn't seem to have a whole lot of energy. I cannot independently verify that. I'm not around the team all the time, but that's the feeling that had been the feeling, at least among some on the team. You can look at it a number of different ways. I mean, he is the winningest coach in MLS history. The one thing with changing a coach or a manager is just getting the guy that you have in there out. That's only half of the equation. The other half is who do you bring in? So when you look at the Galaxy, who did they bring in? They have the winningest coach in MLS history. Has the game passed him by a little bit? Well, he was fired in Seattle, and Brian Schmetzer took over, and they won the MLS Cup that year. So clearly he had the tools to have been doing better than he was when he was fired. You can look at this team and say, what else does he need? He's got Zlatan Ibrahimovic. He's got one of the greatest players of his generation. He's got Ola Kamara, one of the best strikers in MLS. He's got a good captain in Ashley Cole. David Bingham, I think, has played fairly well in goal. He's got a good team. He's got the Dos Santos brothers, who have not played up to their capability, I don't think, although Gio's really come on the last couple of weeks. So he certainly has the tools. It's not like last year when Curtinafo was handed a team that was in transition with a bunch of young players. Ziggy has the tools. And you look at a game like yesterday's, as you mentioned, the Galaxy came from behind twice. They were down by a goal twice, came behind, tied the game late, and then gave up a goal with 2 minutes left in regulation. To lose that game, as you mentioned, they've lost 4 of their last 5. The only game they've won in that streak was a 1-0 game in Chicago on a terrible, horrible day for any sport. And they won that game on a goal by Zlatan in first half stoppage time. That easily could have been a draw or even could have gone the other way. So the point is they haven't played very well lately. They haven't looked like a dominant team. Zlatan came in and they won 2 of their first 3 with him, scoring the game-winning goal in both those games. And he's had a couple of assists since then, but they just haven't been a good team. And you look at them and it's hard to find out why. It's difficult to point to one thing. They have changed formations. They've tried to shake things up. They've tried to find a good place for Zlatan to play, but what that has meant is that guys like Ola Kamara, and Roman Alessandrini are now playing in positions they are not comfortable in, and so and now Gio is sort of now emerged as trying to be that playmaker. Not sure if that's really the role that they wanted him to play, but he's doing a pretty good job with that in the last 2 games. So it's a team that appears to be trying to figure out what their personality is, who they are, and how they want to play. And you can look at that and say, yeah, that's the coach's fault. The coach should have been able to figure this out by now. But again, if you're one of those people that wants to move Ziggy and the impatience is starting to grow, who do you get? Certainly Bruce Arena is a guy that is here in Southern California, right up the freeway. He doesn't have a job right now, has a long history with the Galaxy, knows the people there very well. Would he want to come back? I don't know. Dave Sarakin, another guy that is the interim U.S. national team coach, another guy that lives right up the freeway, has a long history with the Galaxy, is a very good coach. Might he be somebody they go and get, or are they going to let Ziggy, work this out? I do think that they need, if things don't turn around quickly, I do think that they need to make a decision soon, because right now they're 3-5-1. They're out of the playoff picture right now. They're in 8th place. I will say one other thing, though, while we're talking about this, is when you look at the Galaxy's early season schedule, their first 8 games were all against teams, with one exception. All 7 of the first 8 games were against teams that made the playoffs last year. The only team they played in the first 8 that didn't make the playoffs was LAFC, because they weren't in the league last year, but now they're the second best team in the conference. and it continues to get bad. They play Dallas next week. Then they get a little bit of a breather against Montreal and San Jose, but then they come back and get Dallas, Portland, Real Salt Lake. So it's a very tough early season schedule. Conversely, you look at LAFC, and they're off to a 5-2-1 start, and they look great. Well, they haven't played the same tough schedule. They've had some games that, when you just look at the competition, would appear to be much easier. They played Seattle twice. Seattle's in last place. They played Montreal. So I think the Galaxy also have been hurt momentum-wise from their tough early season schedule.
Kevin, we were joking off the mic before he came on that now that Arsene Wenger is gone from Arsenal, he should come to MLS, and LA Galaxy would be a perfect landing spot for him.
I've heard that, and I haven't taken that seriously, because I try to wrap my head around Arsene Wenger, all that he's accomplished and all that he's done. Coming to MLS, certainly, I suppose someone could find the money somewhere, but why would he want to do that? I just don't see that as being a good fit. But every time I say something like that, I mean, I can make the argument, and we could talk for hours, and I could totally convince you that that would be the dumbest thing Arsene Wenger could do. But that's kind of the same argument I would have made with some of these other players that have wound up in MLS. I never thought after Zlatan went to Manchester United that he would come to MLS after that, and here he is. So it's difficult. It's tough to know, but I will say this about any of those big names, whether it's a manager like Arsene Wenger, someone who might be available after the World Cup. That's a time when a lot of coaches move around. And some of the big-name players, I think you're going to see some big-name players come to MLS after the World Cup as well. Maybe a Chicharito, who's definitely not going to go back to West Ham. But when those players come, I think you're going to see them go to Seattle either the LA clubs or one of the New York clubs, and it's just not because of necessarily the money, but the prestige. People in Europe, in South America, they know the Galaxy, they know the Red Bulls. They don't necessarily know Sporting Kansas City or the Columbus Crew. Smaller communities, smaller towns, not as cosmopolitan, not as diverse with the language skills and things that some of the players from Latin America appreciate. I do know there's one big name player playing in a Midwestern city that came over from Europe, a very high profile player whose name I won't mention because he told me this in confidence, but very unhappy with where he is, and he's actually talked to people with the Galaxy saying, is there any way that the league can work out a transfer and get me to Los Angeles? Wow. A lot of the players that come here, when they come, they've already made their money. They don't really, and you look at Zlatan, he's here for $1.5 million a year. So they don't come here necessarily for the money. They come here for a lot of other things, and the lifestyle is a big part of that. And this is not to say anything bad about Kansas City or Salt Lake or Columbus. I mean, they're all great places to live. But if you're coming from Europe and you've lived in Rome or you've lived in Munich or you've lived in London, an LA or a New York or even a Seattle with a great soccer culture there is a little bit of an easier transition than going to one of these smaller towns where soccer may not be the most important sport there.
I feel like sometimes we see that in Dallas as well, especially. Even though you'd be living in Dallas, I guess you technically wouldn't be living in Dallas because they do play in Frisco and you have to travel to Frisco every day. And I don't know if you want to make that hour-long drive, this or that. And it doesn't have that prestige, such as you mentioned, as a New York or a Los Angeles. But, Kevin, I want to ask you about the Zlatan effect in LA. On the field, he has been making plays and has been scoring a couple of goals here or there, but is he getting a little frustrated? Because I know Alexi Lawless, I think, mentioned this, and I know it's Alexi Lawless, but I think it was a good point in terms of that Zlatan is coming to a team that really isn't the best in its league or one of the top ones in its league. They're kind of, So do you think he's kind of getting maybe a little upset with how it's going so far?
I do. I think that he's mentioned to a few players in the locker room. He's chastised some players for not for giving one particular player. He talked to about giving the ball up too easily, not making the crisp passes that Zlatan wants, not to feed him the ball in the right position where he's prepared to receive it. And I think, to me, that was like Zlatan still thinks he's playing for Manchester United, and this is not a knock on anyone who's on the LA Galaxy, but the reason a lot of these players are in MLS are and playing for the LA Galaxy is because, frankly, they're not good enough to play in the Premier League. If they were DeAndre Yedlin or Jeff Cameron, they'd be playing there. I mean, so the fact that they're not there, is sort of suggests that they haven't had the opportunity. They're just not good enough to play there. So Zlatan's looking around and he's wondering why these players aren't, EPL caliber. Well, that's why they're in MLS. I don't think he has mentioned that the league, that the pace of play in the league and the style of play is much different from England. He's talked about that. He's been, very upfront about it. I don't think he realized just how deep the drop-off was. And then there have been a couple of games that he's played in this year where the officiating has just been atrocious. And so I think Zlatan looks around and says, these guys aren't as good as I thought they would be. The refereeing is horrible. We go play he went to, his first road game was in Chicago, so he went to Bridgeview, Illinois, and trained in the middle of that pasture and then played the game there when it was, I think the wind chill was 26 degrees. So he's got off to a rough start experience-wise in MLS with the team struggling, with the style of play, with injuries, with the travel. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if he was getting a little frustrated that he's perhaps thinking this is not what I signed up for. And it is a different Galaxy team. If he had come a couple of years ago when Bruce Arena had that great offseason when he signed Nigel de Jong, Ashley Cole, they had Steven Gerrard with the team then, I believe, and Robbie Keane. That was a different team. And you could come in as a European player and look around and feel like you had some people that were going through the same thing you were, experiencing the same thing, had been in the same places, and there was some maybe a little bit more camaraderie. I will say those players did not mix well, all of them anyway, did not mix well with the MLS players. So there were some some problems in the locker room. But Zlatan's, with the exception of perhaps Ashley Cole, Zlatan's kind of, on his own in this experience, and it is a little bit difficult. And he has not said anything manifestly that would tell us that he's frustrated, but I think you can look at his expressions on the field and just knowing that the way the team is struggling. I mean, this is a guy who has won league championships in every league that he's played in. He does not play on losing teams. He said the other day when they lost, I think their third in a row at home, he said, and no one looked it up, I'm not sure if it was a throwaway line, but he said he'd never played on a team that lost 3 games in a row before. So that's the kind of experience he's had. He's got to be frustrated.
Kevin, we really appreciate it. Go ahead and just tell us where we can find your content and where we can follow you on Twitter.
Yeah, LA Times, latimes.com online. All the soccer stuff's right there at the bottom of the sports page online. There's a little soccer tab down on the bottom right. And then on Twitter, kbaxter11. Everything gets posted there as well.
Awesome, Kevin. We appreciate it.
Thanks for the time.
Fantastic interview with Kevin Baxter. We're back here on Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast. Steven, what was your take from the interview here? A lot of interesting information laid out by Kevin.
I know we joked about it off the show, off the mic, and we briefly mentioned it to Kevin about Arsene Wenger coming to MLS. It's not that bad of a take, and this is coming from Jake. You're the one that brought this up, and I have to say it's not that bad of an idea if you're LA Galaxy, because you know what that would do for Zlatan? It would shut him up.
He has to respect Arsene Wenger.
He would.
Right?
He would have to at least respect the fact that he's coming from Arsenal and he's been at the club for over 2 decades. Right? Would shut him up.
I would agree. Yeah, I mean, what is he gonna do? Arsene Wenger, you don't know anything. Well, he does. So I mean, like I said, I think it makes sense too because if you're Wenger, do you really want to coach in Europe longer, or do you want to come to America, where I'd say there might not be as much pressure on him as Arsenal pressure?
Right.
And you're entering the latter stages of your life. Maybe why not give it one more go in a different league?
The reports out of England a while back were something that Arsene Wenger would take an international job, which I think the U.S. men's national team would be fun to see him be at the helm
it wouldn't. Nope.
Different conversation for another day. And he would do some sort of sporting director role, whatever that may be. I don't know. He loves Arsenal. He's a fan of the club, so maybe he finds something on the board. Or I don't know. Maybe he comes to MLS. I don't know. Coming to MLS at his age would be a lot of work. A ton of travel, not very comforting. The stadiums are not the best. You play in some high-class stadiums, and then you have to travel to Columbus. And it's just, you just get a mixture of good, bad, and crap.
No, yeah, but I'm really intrigued by the player that Kevin was talking about that is unhappy at his Midwest club and was asking to be moved to L.A.
We do have audio of that particular clip. Let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and play it so that way we get to really dig into what Baxter says here.
Smaller communities, smaller towns, not as cosmopolitan, not as diverse with the language skills and things that some of the players from Latin America appreciate. I do know there's one big name player playing in a Midwestern city that came over from Europe, a very high profile player whose name I won't mention because he told me this in confidence, but very unhappy with where he is. And he's actually talked to people with the Galaxy saying, is there any way that the league can work out a transfer and get me to Los Angeles?
Wow.
A lot of the players that come here, when they come, they've already made their.
So, Armand, who is this player? High profile, coming from Europe in the Midwest. And our research points us to 4 clubs this could be. You want to name those 4 clubs for us?
Yeah, after looking at a map of the Midwest.
I can't believe you had to Google this, by the way.
I want to confirm, okay? Like, you see, like, it could be different. I mean, Steven thought Salt Lake was part of the Midwest.
No, not Salt Lake. Colorado, if anything.
Colorado.
You can't say it was Salt Lake. Oh, please.
Okay, you see, even worse. But it was...
I thrown him under the bus because he had to Google what the Midwest was.
So it's Minnesota, Chicago, Columbus, and SKC. So we got to pick from those 4 teams. So it's obviously Darwin Quintero. Sorry, Jake. Your new signing hates your city.
The scientist, as we call him up here, I know for a fact, does not hate Minnesota.
How do you know?
I don't know. I don't know how you could play for a team for 3 weeks to a month. You know what? I want out. Get me out of here. LA Galaxy, come save me.
Okay, but the point he's making, if you, I don't want to play the entire clip because he talks. It's like a 2-minute entire clip. It's 2 minutes long, and it's just too long to play. But the point being is something I mentioned not too long ago. It's the fact that these cities offer a lot more of that nightlife type of deal, so the big cities cater to those players. But who could it be? Sporting KC's. Do you think it's one of their new European players that came over this past winter?
I mean, that's the only player I can think of, or possibly someone from Columbus who's kind of upset at the whole. I know a lot of players have talked about how it's kind of moving from Austin or the potential move of relocation, and I think that's why was one of the reasons why Ola Kamara wanted to. I'm not sure. Don't hold me to that, but I would have to say it's from someone from one of those clubs because, I mean, if it's Chicago, who would it be? You'd say Bastian Schweinsteiger, but is he really upset? Is it Nikolic?
Chicago's
No.
a big market. Let's not forget, it has to involve. I would take Chicago out of this. And call me crazy, but Chicago's a big market. There's a ton of nightlife there. Everybody knows where Chicago is.
You're not crazy.
It's the 3rd biggest market in the
You're
US.
not crazy.
Well, I know, but I mean, we're talking about the Midwest here. Where it's not Bastion. Calm down, people. I know. I could already hear people out. All the listeners. It's Bastion. Oh my God, it's Bastion. Bastion wants out. No, that's not what we're saying here.
Mickey Mouse is back again, guys.
Not what we're saying here.
So are you guys saying it's someone probably from SKC or Columbus?
Well, he does single out SKC and Columbus Crew a couple different times.
Yeah, he does. I like
answering
it,
that
Jake.
question, and that kind of leads me to believe that it's someone on the crew. Thank God, Darwin Quintero still, he's gonna be alone forever.
But here's the thing, guys. He has to come from a European team. Remember that. It's a the question is what's high profile? Secondly, he's coming from Europe, right? To me, it would make sense that it's Crozet in KC, but can you really say that after several weeks? Furthermore, we also looked at the schedule of LA Galaxy to see, because Kevin Baxter is based in Galaxy, unless he's traveled around, the Galaxy have played Sporting KC, so I think...
See, this is why... people will tell Kevin Baxter his things because he says something very vague, and we're trying to dissect it. And it's done a great job protecting your sources, as they teach you in a BJ school that
yes.
I haven't gone to ever in my life. But I mean, it's interesting because you're right, Steven. A lot of players are going to be like, "Hey, I want to move to a big name city because I mean, like I said, the nightlife and whatnot. I mean." And also, I think you mentioned the atmospheres too last week as well. And I think all that does play a role. And that's why if you're one of these smaller markets, you got to go, all right, we got to find some young, unknown Europe, maybe South American talent, maybe European talent, and hope to develop him because he doesn't have to love the city. He just wants to be a better soccer player.
Yeah, but you don't have to get a... I would just say just go young. The MLS, the small markets have to trend young because you can sit there and offer them the chance to look. You're coming to America at a young age. Most of these players typically are poor when they grow up. I mean, that's why, look at Messi, look at Ronaldo. The best players in the world were dirt poor when they're young, Neymar included. So it's not a rich man's sport, so you offer them to come to America. Life in America seems to be better than where they're coming from.
Your paychecks come on time?
Yeah, that too. And then you look, Europe, we're gaining traction with European clubs and coming over to buy players. Look at Barco. Once you can get that first name to move to Europe from MLS,
Jack
I think
Harrison?
the floodgates open. Yeah, Jack Harrison's it's a young one, but how many Latin American players are going to look at Jack Harrison as the role model? No, they're going to look at Almiron or Barco or Martinez. Those are the three players that are probably going to make the biggest splash and open the floodgates for the youngsters of South America, Latin America to come into MLS and infiltrate the young players and hopefully develop a good just mojo and just goes by a year. But I think Kevin Baxter's comments are very interesting. I'll give you guys give final thoughts, Jake and Armand.
I agree. I think it's interesting, and I find it really interesting, the whole Zlatan thing, because I do feel like Zlatan is getting upset. I had a discussion with a friend of mine about the elbow. I didn't think it was a red card because of just, you could call it a soccer move, and the fact that Kyoto's kind of bending down, and the fact is his elbow is level with his head. So, what can you do? I mean, you can say it's a soccer move and it's accidental. Sorry. The intent there isn't clear, but you can tell he's getting frustrated. That MLS is a little bit, I think, harder than he expected or worse than he expected.
I could have told him that.
And again, it comes back to Alexi Lawless's point, which, like I said, it's Alexi Lawless, but he made a good point. It's the first time Zlatan's come into a team that that's not the best. And let's not forget, the Galaxy were dead last year. Let's not forget that. Just because they had Zlatan doesn't make them automatically amazing. And I've told many people that, especially people who are going to the FC Dallas LA game, nah, man, they're going to kill Dallas. It's have you seen the Galaxy play? No?
Hashtag Euro snobs, hashtag don't know MLS.
Hashtag think MLS easy. Jake, what about you?
I mean, the one thing I thought was interesting, and I think you two can speak to this better than I can, just because, especially you, Armand, you're based in Dallas, was the Heat. The comments on the Heat.
Yeah, let me tell you something about the Heat. Many people are like, why does Dallas not get high attendance? And people say it's the Heat. All of a sudden you hear, oh, it's an excuse, blah, 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 blah. And I've heard that from many people. I've seen it on message boards. I've seen it across. I've heard it from other people. So what's Dallas done to combat that? They try to push back their start times to about 7 or 8 in the summer.
8. I think it's closer to 8 every time in the summer.
Yeah, it's almost closer to 8 almost every time in the summer. And the fact is, if people were making fun of Dallas and all these teams for it's almost a week out basis, and part of it is due to marketing. I mean, you've heard my rants on it. You've seen what I say. I'm not defending them, but it's also hot as hell some days. So I can agree with that. But it has to be a double standard, right? If you're gonna hold Dallas accountable for not getting butts in seats, and they're saying it's too hot and it's extremely hot, then why does LAFC get a pass on that?
Well, I mean, the thing though is like he was saying though, because I did this twice last year at a Minnesota game. How many people actually are in the concourse watching the game, just because they're trying to get out of the sun and it's too hot and they just want to sit in the shade. Just because it looks like they might only be at 75% capacity, maybe there are a few thousand people standing behind these sections trying to get out of the sun. I don't know. Like I said, I've done it before too. When he said that, I'm like, I understand that. I mean, I've been to a game where it was 95 degrees and I didn't want to stand there in the sun.
I've never not gone to an FC Dallas game during my time in Dallas because of the heat. If anything, I was always deterred by rain. That's the only time where I sat there. But when it's hot as hell, I still sucked it up and you still went. Because why? Because I was interested in the sport and I was also interested in the game. I think it's a lame excuse to blame the heat. The owners of LAFC knew what type of stadium they're building. It's their fault for not covering those seats if the sun is angled at that direction. That's their fault. To me, that's MLS's fault for not looking at the stadium plans and going like, hey guys, maybe we should do something better. Now, I'm blaming just as much as Dan Hunt and the ownership in Dallas for not building any roofs on their seats. Okay? But if you're going to play in a market, you got to protect the fans and put them some shade, and you got to make sure the grass is real and it's not turf, because when it's above 80 degrees, the turf becomes scorching hot, and it's bad. Anyway, tune in next week. We got some great new bits coming in and on the show. Follow Armand at Armand Kafai, Jake Watroba, Steven Jodder, and Uncle Sam Soccer Pod. Listeners, we appreciate it. We're through episode 50, on to 51, boys.
I love y'all.
we could almost be our podcast is so old it's almost eligible for AARP.
Anyway, until next week.